In half an hour on Scottish, a courtroom battle between father and son in The Bill. First, we meet a real-life raider of the Lost Ark.
The Bible describes it as the embodiment of God's presence on earth, the sign and the seal of his divine will. An ornate wooden box covered with gold and endowed with a fierce and mysterious power. The Ark of the Covenant. More than 2,500 years ago, it vanished without a trace. Its loss is the greatest unsolved mystery of the Bible. It's captured the imagination of Hollywood. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones was driven by an obsession to track down the priceless relic. Early books of the Bible tell us that the Ark was built to carry the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. But according to the scriptures, there's much more to it than this. It is also infused with the vengeful power of God. The Ark has a peculiar power over its seekers. For centuries, it has seduced treasure hunters and fanatics, archaeologists and biblical scholars into a long and unrewarded search. Even today, there are many who believe that the Ark of the Covenant still exists. I'm one of them. My name is Graham Hancock. I'm neither a treasure hunter nor a biblical scholar. I'm an investigative writer whose field is the past, a sort of historical detective on the trail of unsolved mysteries. Several years ago, in Ethiopia, I came across some intriguing clues that suggested where the Ark might be. They launched me on a voyage of discovery. It became a kind of obsession for me, the power and the aura of the Ark of the Covenant. I became entranced by it. I ate it, I slept it, I breathed it, I dreamed it. All the time it was with me, and I couldn't let it go. Ethiopia may seem an unlikely place to look for the Ark of the Covenant, but I became intrigued when I discovered something puzzling but significant about Ethiopian religious beliefs. Isolated by burning deserts and lofty mountains, Ethiopia is home to one of the oldest forms of Christianity on earth. Central to this archaic faith is the conviction that the Ark of the Covenant is not lost at all, that it still exists, hidden away, here in this tiny chapel in Ethiopia's sacred city of Aksum. Replicas of the Ark are carried in many of their religious processions, but most scholars refuse to accept that the real Ark could possibly be here. For them, there's a problem with the story. According to legend, the Ark came to Axum around 1000 BC. The trouble is that Axum wasn't even founded until 1,000 years after that date. So 10 centuries are still unaccounted for. It's this gap that has led archaeologists and historians to dismiss the legend out of hand. I felt they were making a serious mistake. At one level, I was looking to punch the scholars in the nose. I didn't feel good about the dismissive and arrogant and frankly stupid way in which they just wrote off this huge tradition. People hold their beliefs on the basis of experience and tradition, and I believe tradition is important, and there's no country in the world that expresses its traditions with such fervor and conviction as Ethiopia does. It was with a mixture of respect and commitment that I set out to uncover the facts which might lie behind the tradition of the Ark. I needed to move away from the legends and see if I could identify a real historical process that could have brought the Ark to Ethiopia. I had to piece together a jigsaw puzzle that had been scattered over 3,000 years and across the whole of North Africa and the Middle East. I knew only one thing for sure. The Ark had last been seen 30 centuries ago in Jerusalem, 1,200 miles to the north of Axum. Jerusalem had to be my starting point. This is where the Ark disappeared. But after so many years, what kind of clues could I hope to find? Its last known resting place is a spot held sacred by both Jews and Muslims. Today, a great mosque known as the Dome of the Rock stands on this site. The Islamic faithful believe that the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven from the stone beneath this soaring dome. For the Jews, this rock formed the floor of the holiest sanctuary of the Temple of Solomon, where the Ark of the Covenant was placed by Solomon himself some 3,000 years ago. This is where my quest had to start. What I hoped to discover was when and why the Ark had been taken from Solomon's temple in the first place. I learned that the Bible had drawn a veil over the whole subject in a manner so devious and subtle that to me it hinted at a deliberate cover-up. It's amazing that the biblical story, which is so dominated by the presence of the Ark of the Covenant in the early books of the Old Testament, does not record the disappearance of the Ark. There is not a single statement in the Bible which tells us how or why or when the Ark of the Covenant left the Temple of Solomon. To penetrate the Bible's secrets, I used a computer. I needed to date the disappearance of the Ark, and so I scrutinized every reference to the sacred relic. Where was the last definite indication that the Ark was still present in the temple, and also the first definite indication that it had gone missing? The computer search threw up some interesting new evidence. It highlighted an 80-year window of opportunity when the Ark could have been removed, and better still, a reason for its removal. I found in that 80-year period that a very significant event did occur. A king took the throne of Jerusalem, a king named Manasseh, who abandoned the traditional Judaic faith. This man is reviled in the Bible for what he did. It was a time of hysteria and bloodshed. Manasseh was a king of unparalleled brutality. He murdered the faithful and defiled the Temple of Solomon by installing a pagan idol in the Holy of Holies, the sanctuary of the Ark. The Bible talks of the streets of Jerusalem flowing with blood, of massacres on a large scale. It must have been a terrifying time. A kind of madness seemed to have seized the country. From this murder and bloodshed the priests did indeed flee, and they carried the Ark of the Covenant with them out of the temple.
This was guesswork, but if I was right, if devout Jews had indeed rescued the Ark from Manasseh, then where would they have taken it? It was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Then came news of a remarkable discovery, an archaeological find on a small island in Egypt on the Upper Nile. That island is called Elephantine. It stands smack in the middle of the ancient trade route that once connected Ethiopia to Palestine. Here, to everyone's surprise, a Jewish temple was built in the mid-7th century before Christ. It was exactly the time that Manasseh sat on the throne of Jerusalem. But why was the Elephantine temple built? Experts have investigated the scattered ruins of the large Jewish settlement that once thrived on this Egyptian island. They point out that there was no theological precedent for the existence of a Jewish temple here. They admit that it really shouldn't have been built at all, unless, that is, it was intended to fulfill a very special function. What could that have been? Isn't it possible, even likely, that priests fleeing Jerusalem with the Ark during Manasseh's reign of terror made their way here and built this temple to shelter their precious relic?
This was the only Jewish temple in the world outside of Jerusalem in this period. And the only possible justification for the building of that temple, which in every respect mimicked Solomon's temple, was as a house of refuge for the Ark of the Covenant.
This, for me, was an important revelation, a crucial missing piece in the vast jigsaw puzzle of hidden history. But if I was right, if Elephantine had been a staging post on the Ark's journey to Ethiopia, then how long did it remain there? What caused it to be moved again? The answers to these questions came from another piece of the island's history, a documented event that occurred in the late 5th century BC, more than 200 years after priests fleeing from Manasseh had built the temple on Elephantine. While local Egyptians of the period worshipped the ram god Khnum, the Jews of Elephantine continued to practice a long-standing tradition of ram sacrifice. This led to conflict between the two communities, a conflict that eventually erupted into violence. In 410 BC, the Jewish temple on the island was destroyed. At the same time, the Elephantine Jews quietly vanished from history. It's a considerable mystery. There's no evidence that these people were massacred. There are no burials, there's nothing. They just vanished and disappeared. They went away. But where did they go? Carrying the sacred Ark of the Covenant with them, they could hardly have risked going north through the territory of their persecutors, the Egyptians. To the east and the west were impassable deserts. This meant that they had only one escape route open to them, south, following the Nile to the alluring green mountains and lakes of Ethiopia. If you follow the Nile south along well-established trade and migration routes, you come eventually to Lake Tana in the Ethiopian highlands, where the Blue Nile rises. Like a road through the wilderness, I could now see that the great river tied distant places together so directly and so simply that the 1,200-mile journey from Jerusalem to Aksum by way of Egypt no longer seemed improbable. But Aksum was founded relatively late, around the time of Christ. This meant that the Ark couldn't have gone there directly in the 5th century BC. If its arrival in Ethiopia was connected to the destruction of the Elephantine temple, then it must first have rested somewhere else in this vast and mountainous country. The trail was going cold, but I had one last card to play. I had heard of a remote place in the Ethiopian highlands that is especially renowned as a storehouse for ancient wisdom. A place where the monks are said to possess manuscripts stretching back to the dawn of history. It's the isolated mountaintop monastery of Debradamo. It is a forbidding place, both scary and austere. Protected on all sides by cliffs as tall as a 5-story building, there's only one way to the top, up a rope made of woven leather that feels like it's hung here since the monastery was first established more than 1,500 years ago. I had to climb that rope if I was to have any hope of picking up the Ark's trail. Perhaps the monks of Debre Damo would be able to shed some light on the mystery. I entered a world that few outsiders have ever seen. The abbot told me stories and showed me books that recounted legends from Ethiopia's past. But he could tell me nothing that I didn't already know about the Ark of the Covenant. I was about to give up when something in an old story caught my attention. The mention of a monastery, even more ancient than Debre Damo, that had long ago served as a hiding place for sacred treasures. What excited me was the location of the monastery. It stands on an island on Lake Tana, the source of the Blue Nile, the route the migrants from Elephantine had to follow on their journey into Ethiopia with the Ark. Though there was nothing definite, this was a clue that I had to investigate. There was just a chance that I might pick up the trail again.
In Ethiopian tradition, Lake Tana has always been a sacred place. There's more than 40 islands on this lake, many of them with remote monasteries established upon them. And these monasteries have been used as repositories of ancient treasures since times immemorial. Whenever Ethiopia has come under attack, the treasures of the country have been brought here and placed on these lost islands in this vast lake, kept safe from invaders.
From the moment that I first set eyes on the island of Tana Kirkos from the boat, I had a feeling that I was going to find something really important there. As I saw the monks coming down towards the waterfront, I felt a tremendous sense of excitement. Obscure and forgotten, the monastery is virtually unknown today, even to Ethiopians. A small community of monks still practices a simple lifestyle in complete seclusion here. They have preserved a unique oral tradition. This is what the abbot of Tana Kirkos told me.
The people of Israel came to this place and brought the ark with them. They chose to keep their sacred treasure here because of its isolation. The ark was brought here and stayed for 800 years until our country was converted to Christianity. Then it was taken to Aksum.
So here at last was the final piece of the jigsaw puzzle. Tana Kirkos was the place where the ark had rested before it was brought to Aksum. That alone would have been enough for me, but the monks also had something else. These stone altars, which they claimed were once used in the worship of the ark itself.
They are here today in the same spot. The tent that held the ark was here. The people gathered around, and the blood was collected like this in the bowls and then splashed on the people. This place has been holy for thousands of years. The ark was here, the sacrificial place was there, and this is how it was done, as told to us by our forefathers.
Experts confirm that the stones are cut in the proper historical style. There's no way that they can be dated scientifically, but I was now convinced.
What was really exciting about this for me was that for the first time I had hard information, physical objects that I could touch, stones that had been used for sacrifice before the ark, and traditions that showed me that those forms of sacrifice fitted very closely with what I knew about the ancient Judaic sacrifices that had been performed in front of the ark, and a specific date, really very much a specific date, that the ark had been on the island for 800 years, and at the time of Ethiopia's conversion to Christianity, a known date, the 350s AD, the ark had been removed to Axum.
At last, I'd filled in all the geographical and historical gaps. Starting in Jerusalem, I'd traced the ark's journey as it was carried into Egypt, then along the Nile River system to Elephantine, on to Tanakerkos, and finally in the 4th century to Axum, when that city became the capital of the Christian kings of Ethiopia.
For me, the circle was closed at this point, and closed in an utterly convincing manner. On the one hand, I had a country, Ethiopia, the only country in the world claiming to possess the Ark of the Covenant and with a living tradition of worship of the Ark of the Covenant. On the other hand, a viable, understandable, sensible historical process that left legend and mysteries behind and gave a historical explanation for how and when and why the Ark of the Covenant had gone to Ethiopia. These two things meshed together and closed the circle, fitting perfectly. I have no doubt at all that the Ark of the Covenant is in the sanctuary chapel in Axum, and I have no doubt at all that I have established how it got there.
There's a tiny chapel in the center of Axum in the compound of the ancient church dedicated to St. Mary of Zion. Ethiopians believe that inside this modest sanctuary rests the true Ark of the Covenant. Now I believe it too. But only one man is allowed the privilege and burden of tending the sacred relic, Abba Tesfa Miriam, guardian of the Ark of the Covenant. He is the only man believed holy enough to stand in the presence of the Ark and live.
It cannot be touched. It is more powerful than fire. You cannot touch it, and you cannot look upon it with your eyes. It is a miracle, I tell you, and it can destroy you as easily as it can save your soul. No exceptions can be made. Those who are not pure cannot enter the chapel and touch the ark. If your desire is to see the ark, you simply cannot. It is forbidden.
Abba Tesfa Miriam has taken a solemn vow never to leave this tiny chapel sanctuary. He will guard its contents until the day that death takes him from his sacred duty. Am I right or am I wrong? At the end of my journey, I suppose I've done no more than weave a web of theories, conjectures, and coincidences, a series of speculations neither proved nor disproved. Right or wrong, however, my quest ends here, at the gates of the chapel. I'll never know for sure if the object of my obsession lies just beyond my reach. And perhaps that's as it should be. Perhaps the Ark of the Covenant can only keep its power if it remains a mystery, an object always just beyond our grasp.